So okay, so you get the idea. So like at the bottom of the brain there's all these systems that are really alive and sort of on fire, and they're all generating up these motivational frames of reference, and they do that. That's instinct, so to speak, you know. And then all of that's elaborated up by the cortex, and the cortex is saying, okay, well, these things are like a pack of fighting 2-year-olds. So by the way, and I mean that because if you take children and you put them in age-matched groups, and so you have a group of 18-month-olds and 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds and so on, all the way up to 16-year-olds, say, and then you count violent interactions, kicking, hitting, biting, stealing. The 2-year-olds are like, they're just all over that, you know. But it's not actually quite right, because some of the 2-year-olds are peaceful and passive, but there's a subset of the 2-year-olds that are like chaotic motivational machines, right? They're just running around being as impulsive as can possibly be, and you can think about them as almost under complete hypothalamic control. They're just cycling from one intense motivational state to another. That makes 2-year-olds a blast. Like, they're really fun to be around, except they're kind of a pain in the neck. But they're really fun because they're really on fire. They're into this and into that and into this, and then they fall down because they're too tired, and then they wake up and they're starving to death, and you know, they're really alive. But then what has to happen is that those behaviors, those motivational states, which are sort of working in isolation, they start to conflict with one another, you know, so that the child can't really organize any medium to long-term behavioral strategies, being that impulsive. So what the cortex is there for is to start sequencing those motivational systems in higher order structures that allow each of them to get what they need in order to function across long periods of time in increasingly complex social environments. That's what the cortex is for. So it's a complex regulatory mechanism, and what it's doing is keeping, it's like a nuclear reactor. The core is really hot and fiery, and you need to sink rods into it to keep it under control, to dampen it. And that's really, it's a good analogy for how your brain works, because the underlying systems, they're on fire, they're alive. And the cortex is saying, well, a little bit of you now, and a little bit of you, and then some of you, and wait your turn, and so on. And it sequences out over long stretches of time. That's really socialization. And that's quite a different view than the Freudian view of repression. You know, because I would say you only have to repress a motivational system if you're not very successful. Because if you're a successful and well-socialized person, you don't have to suppress them or repress them, you just have to sequence them. That's all, because they're all going to get what they want, right? And that means that you're a good player of complex social games. And that has very little to do with repression or inhibition. It's just sequencing. It's important. It's important.